On a muggy morning in May 2005, a man named Jerry Jackson stood on a bridge over the Grand Marais Canal just outside Jennings, Louisiana. The air was thick with the smell of swamp, water, and Spanish moss. Jerry, a soft-spoken retiree, was out to catch some fish, hoping for a quiet day. But as he cast his line, something caught his eye in the murky water below. At first, he thought it was a mannequin, maybe one stolen from a store, like he'd heard on the news. But then he saw the flies. Mannequins don't attract flies. His stomach churned as he finally realized he was staring at a body. He fumbled for his phone and dialed 911. Within hours, deputies from the Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office swarmed the scene. The body was identified as 28-year-old Loretta Lynn Chason Lewis, a local woman known to struggle with crack addiction and sex work. Her life hadn't been easy. Poverty and addiction had pulled her into a world where survival meant taking risks most people couldn't imagine. The coroner found signs of blunt force trauma to her head, but the swamp water had done its job. Decomposition made it nearly impossible to pin down exactly how or when she died. Was she killed elsewhere and dumped here? Did she die in the canal? No one could say for sure. The sheriff's office called it a tragic but isolated case. A sex worker with a drug problem, found dead in a rough town. Sad, but not surprising, they said. They filed the report and moved on. But 3 months later, on August 17, 2005, another call came in. Some friends hunting bullfrogs stumbled across a second body in a canal south of Jennings. It was 30-year-old Ernestine Marie Daniels Patterson, another woman caught in the same cycle of poverty, drugs, and sex work as Loretta. Like Loretta, her body was too decomposed to reveal much. The cause of death? A mystery swallowed by the swamp. The similarities were hard to miss. Both women knew each other. Both lived on the fringes of Jennings, a small town of about 10,000 people nestled along the I-10 corridor, a notorious drug trafficking route between Houston and New Orleans. Both were part of a world where danger was a constant companion, but the sheriff's office didn't connect the dots. They treated Ernestine's death as another one-off, just another consequence of a, quote, high-risk lifestyle. Then, in March 2007, a third body surfaced. Kristen Gary Lopez, only 21 years old, was found in yet another canal. Her cousin, Brittany Gary, would later become another victim. By May 2008, Whitney Dubois, 26, was discovered on a rural road, her body left like trash. The pattern was undeniable now. Someone was definitely targeting women in Jennings, women who shared the same struggles and ran in the same circles. At this point, 4 women were dead: Loretta, Ernestine, Kristen, and Whitney. All of them lived hard lives in the same small Louisiana town. All of them were connected in one way or another. But what investigators would uncover next wasn't just a pattern of murders. There was a whole web of tangled mess, relationships linking these women to each other, to the local drug trade, and to the very people who were supposed to protect them. Many of these women worked out of the Boudreaux Inn, a rundown motel in Jennings known as a hub for drugs and sex work. They shared the same pimp, a man named Frankie Richard, a local strip club owner with a long rap sheet and a reputation for being untouchable. They bought drugs from the same dealers, often along the I-10 corridor where cash and cocaine flowed freely. But the connections went even deeper. Several of these women, including Loretta, Kristen, and Whitney, had worked as informants for the Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office. They fed tips about the drug trade, about dealers, and sometimes even about each other. In return, they got leniency, cash, or a blind eye turned to their own activities. But being an informant in Jennings was a dangerous game. These women were constantly seeing things. Things like police officers allegedly involved in drug deals, evidence disappearing from crime scenes, things that could get you killed. As investigative journalist Ethan Brown later wrote in his book Murder in the Bayou, these girls lost their lives because they'd seen something, heard something, knew something that they weren't supposed to know. By 2008, the body count had climbed to 6. Laconia Muggy Brown, 23, was found in a canal with her throat slit. Crystal Shea Benoizino, 24, turned up in another waterway. Her body was too far gone to determine how she died. The swamp was becoming a graveyard, and the women of Jennings were running out of time. In August 2009, the 8th body was found off Interstate 10 in neighboring Acadia Parish. Nicole Jean Guillery, 26, was the last of what would become known as the Jeff Davis 8. Like the others, she was a sex worker and drug user, and like the others, she had been an informant. But Nicole was different. She was loud about what she knew. She told friends and family she'd seen things that made her a target. According to her mother, Barbara Guillery, Nicole was paranoid in her final days, refusing to go anywhere alone. When Barbara asked about her upcoming 27th birthday, Nicole brushed it off, saying it didn't matter since she wasn't going to be here. Nicole had been a witness in a 2002 corruption case involving a sex trafficking ring at the Jefferson Davis Parish jail. She'd spoken out about deputies who allegedly raped and trafficked female inmates using sexual assault as currency in a contraband smuggling operation. Her knowledge made her dangerous. And her death felt like a message: stop talking, or end up like the others. 8 women, all dead between 2005 and 2009, all connected by their lifestyles, relationships, and their ties to law enforcement. The swamp had claimed them all, and the official response was deafening silence. Let's talk about the man at the center of this nightmare, Frankie Richard. A pimp, strip club owner, and suspected drug dealer, Frankie was a known figure in Jennings' underworld. He admitted to having sex with most of the victims, including Kristen Lopez, one of the last people seen with her before her death. In 2007, he was charged with Kristen's murder. But the case fell apart when the witnesses gave conflicting stories, and a key piece of evidence was mishandled. Conveniently, some would say. Frankie wasn't just a criminal, he was allegedly an informant himself, feeding information to the sheriff's office while running his own operations. This blurred the line between lawbreaker and law enforcer in a way that made Jennings feel like a house of mirrors. Witnesses claimed Frankie had ties to deputies who helped him cover his tracks. 2 female inmates allegedly told investigators the sheriff's office disposed of evidence in Kristen Lopez's case at Frankie's request. But the sergeant who took those statements was forced out of his job, and the allegations were swept under the rug. Frankie himself seemed to know more than he let on. In interviews with Ethan Brown, he hinted at the truth without spelling it out. Nicole knew a whole lot about a whole lot, he said. His words weren't a direct confession, they were more like a warning. In Jennings, knowledge was a death sentence. Frankie died in his sleep in March 2020, taking whatever secrets he held to the grave. As Ethan Brown dug deeper, he uncovered allegations that turned the Jeff Davis 8 case from a murder mystery into a scandal of epic proportions. The Jefferson Davis Parish Sheriff's Office wasn't simply failing to solve these crimes, some might say it was complicit in them. Take Warren Gary, the chief criminal investigator. In 2007, he bought a white Chevy Silverado from an inmate named Connie Seiler, a known associate of Frankie Richard. Witnesses claimed they'd seen Kristen Lopez in that truck the day she vanished. Gary paid $7,000 or $8,000 for it, had it washed, and resold it for $15,000, all before it could be tested for DNA or blood. The Louisiana Board of Ethics fined him for this, and he was removed from the case, but instead of being fired, he was eventually promoted to head of the evidence room. Then there was Jesse Ewing, a deputy who took statements from inmates about the sheriff's office destroying evidence. Afraid to trust his own department, Ewing passed the information to a private investigator, who then sent it to the FBI and the Louisiana Attorney General. Ewing was promptly arrested for obstruction and malfeasance. His career? Ruined. The allegations didn't stop there. Witnesses claimed deputies like Danny Berry solicited sex workers, including some of the victims, from their patrol cars. One witness claimed they saw Brittany Gary get into a car with Berry and his wife the night she disappeared. Another alleged that Terry Guillery, a jail warden and cousin of Nicole Guillery, had sex with Loretta Chason in her cell. These weren't isolated incidents. They painted a picture of a sheriff's office neck-deep in the same criminal world it was supposed to police. In 2009, the sheriff ordered DNA swabs from every investigator on the case, a rare move that suggested they were trying to quell rumors of their own involvement. But the results? Never released. The choice of dump sites was no coincidence. These weren't busy city streets where bodies would be found quickly. They were remote swamps where chance was the only reason these women were even discovered. The swamp gave the killer, or killers, time to cover their tracks. Warm, bacteria-laden water breaks down bodies in days. DNA, fingerprints, and bullet casings all dissolve into the muck. Most of the Jeff Davis 8 were found so decomposed that coroners couldn't even confirm how they died. Only Ernestine Patterson and Laconia Brown had clear signs of violence. Their throats were slit. The rest? Nothing conclusive. By late 2008, with several women dead, the pressure was on. The sheriff's office formed a multi-agency task force with 14 federal, state, and local agencies, vowing to catch a serial killer. But the task force seemed more interested in headlines than answers. Evidence vanished. Crime scenes weren't tested for months. Witnesses who pointed fingers at law enforcement were ignored or punished. The task force's own reports noted interviews implicating deputies, but those leads went nowhere. When the FBI got involved, they focused on drug busts along I-10 and not the murders. Several people, including Frankie Richard, were arrested on drug charges. But no one was ever charged with the killings. Families of the victims grew desperate. Teresa Gary, Brittany's mother, told a documentary crew, "Jennings is just one crooked town. I have never seen a town be so incompetent. We just want some type of justice." The more outsiders looked, the worse it got. Ethan Brown's 2016 book, Murder in the Bayou, revealed a bombshell. A field representative for Congressman Charles Boustany owned the Boudreaux Inn, where Boustany himself allegedly had sex with 3 of the victims. Boustany sued Brown for defamation, but later dropped the case after losing a Senate race. The deeper you dug, the more it seemed like the system was protecting itself. The Jeff Davis 8 case might have faded into obscurity if not for the media. Ethan Brown's book and the 2019 Showtime docuseries Murder in the Bayou brought national attention to Jennings. Podcasts like Criminology and The Casual Criminalist also dissected the case. The media kept the story alive, giving a voice to the families. Barbara Guillory spoke of her daughter Nicole's fear. Tommy Chaisson, Loretta's father, shared his grief over losing his daughter to a system that didn't care. But the local response? Stonewalling. Sheriff Ivy Woods, who took office in 2012, claimed they still didn't know if all 8 deaths were homicides. To the families, that felt like a slap in the face. Jennings isn't just any small town. It's a place where power runs deep through family ties and political connections. The I-10 corridor fuels a drug trade bigger than the town itself, and law enforcement has a history of playing both sides. In the 1990s, officers were caught stealing 300 pounds of marijuana from the evidence room, some of it linked to Frankie Richard. In 2002, deputies were charged in a jail sex trafficking ring, with Nicole Guillory as a key witness. By the time the Jeff Davis 8 murders began, corruption wasn't a theory. It was already proven. The victims weren't random. They were women who saw too much. Loretta, Kristen, and others were allegedly present when police shot an unarmed drug dealer named Leonard Crochet in 2005. Witnesses believed the women were killed to keep them quiet about that shooting, which a state police investigation later found unjustified. Nicole Guillory's outspokenness about jail misconduct made her a liability. This didn't feel like a serial killer. It felt more like a cleanup. Let's pause here. 8 women, 4 years, 0 convictions, a corrupt sheriff's department, a known criminal protected by law enforcement, and families left with nothing but grief and silence. The Jeff Davis 8 were victims of violence and victims of a system that treated them as expendable. Their lives were dismissed. Their deaths were swept under the rug. And somewhere in this web of informants, dirty cops, and forgotten women is the truth. The Jeff Davis 8 case is about what happens when a system decides some lives don't matter. These women were poor, addicted, and involved in sex work. To the authorities, they were disposable. High-risk lifestyle, Sheriff Ricky Edwards called it, as if their choices justified their deaths. But these were daughters, mothers, sisters. Loretta had a family that loved her. Brittany was only 17, with dreams she never got to chase. Nicole was a mother of 4, trying to protect her kids by placing them with relatives before her death. This case also shows how isolation breeds corruption. Jennings is remote, surrounded by swamps that hide secrets and limit oversight. And when law enforcement is part of the problem, who holds them accountable? The Promise of Justice Initiative wrote to the Department of Justice in 2020, urging an investigation into the sheriff's office for corruption, incompetence, and criminal activity. No response has been reported. Nearly 20 years after Loretta's body was found, the Jeff Davis 8 case still remains unsolved. There have been no arrests or convictions, just 8 families left with questions and pain. The swamp has done its job, erasing evidence and protecting the guilty, but the story isn't over. cold case investigators still review the files. New witnesses sometimes come forward. Though fear keeps many silent, online communities continue to push the case into the light. In recent years, the case has sparked change. Louisiana passed a 2008 law banning officers from having sex with people in custody. Advocacy groups like the Sex Workers Project push for better treatment of marginalized communities. But for the families, it's not enough. They want names. They want justice. Somewhere in the connections between the victims, Frankie Richard, and a corrupt sheriff's office lies the truth. What happened to the Jeff Davis 8? Were they killed to silence them about police misconduct? Was Frankie Richard a murderer, a scapegoat, or even both? Did deputies cross the line from negligence to murder? And if the system protected the killers, what else has it hidden? If you're enjoying the video so far, and you enjoy this type of story, please like and subscribe for more. It's February 24th, 1987 in Lakeland, Florida, a mid-sized city nestled in Polk County, right between Tampa and Orlando. Known for its quiet neighborhoods, freshwater lakes, and ties to the phosphate mining industry, Lakeland doesn't often make national headlines. But on that day, something happened that left behind questions that would linger for decades. Michelle Schofield, just 18 years old, is clocking out at Tom's Restaurant, a burger joint off US 98 where she waits tables for tips, barely enough to keep the lights on in the trailer she shares with her husband, Leo Schofield, who's 21. They're a couple in love, chasing a future together, but their marriage has rough patches. Neighbors overheard arguments, and some say they've seen Leo's temper flare. Sometimes a slap, or even a punch, is exchanged during heated moments. So, on that night of the 24th of February, Michelle finishes work at 8:15 p.m. and heads across the street to Sparky's Exxon station, buying a Coke and $3 worth of gas. Leo's at a friend's house, practicing with his band, waiting for her to pick him up. She never does. Michelle somehow goes missing that night. Leo grows worried, calling friends, family, and eventually the Polk County Sheriff's Office. For 3 days, he, his parents, and Michelle's dad, David Somm, search Lakeland's backroads, hoping she's just late or got lost somehow. On February 25th, Michelle's Mazda is found abandoned at an I-4 exit ramp, 7 miles from the trailer. Her belongings are inside, no sign of Michelle. The gear shift shows damage, like it was slammed into park, but Leo and his family keep searching. On the 27th of February, around 6 a.m., Leo's dad, Leo Sr., pulls over near a canal off State Road 33, 7 miles from the car. He says a headache and God's guidance led him there. Michelle's body is there, partially tangled in brush, stabbed 26 times. She's lost nearly 5 pints of blood, a sign of a brutal, personal attack. Her denim skirt was torn, and her shoes were gone. There were 2 small bloodstains, about the size of shoe prints, found in the dirt nearby, but no signs of a struggle. The discovery shakes Lakeland. Michelle was a local girl, known for her grit. The sheriff's office vows to find her killer, but their focus quickly lands on Leo, the young husband who reported her missing. The case against Leo builds fast. He's an easy suspect. Statistics show husbands are often culprits in murders of young women, and neighbors describe a stormy marriage. One neighbor, Alice Scott, tells police she heard screaming from the Schofield's trailer that night and saw Leo carrying a heavy object wrapped in a sheet to the Mazda's trunk. Her husband, John, says she woke him to report a fight, though her story shifts slightly when pressed. Another neighbor, Linda Sells, claims she saw Leo carrying something to the car, but her account is vague. Detectives find a smear of Michelle's blood on a Downy bottle in the Mazda's trunk, plus a larger bloodstain visible from outside. In the trailer, presumptive blood tests, using luminol and phenolphthalein, show positive results for human blood on spots between the bed and dresser, though no red droplets are visible. These tests can react to bleach or rust, but prosecutors argue it suggests a cleanup, especially since the bed sheets are gone. They point to a 911 call Leo made where he sounds frustrated, saying, "If she's just fucking around somewhere, God help her." Witnesses also claim Leo kept a knife in his car, nicknamed the Equalizer, which was now missing. Others, including friends, testify he was abusive, admitting to 3 slaps, one after Michelle saw an ex-boyfriend, and a headbutt that once required paramedics. Some say Leo spoke of Michelle being cut up in water while she was missing, which prosecutors spin as suspicious, though he claims it was said out of fear for her safety. Then there's Leo's father, Leo Schofield Sr. His story raises eyebrows. He says he found Michelle's body in the canal, guided by a headache and divine intervention. He claims she was floating face up, smiling, but crime scene photos show her face down, tangled in brush. Another thing is, the canal is remote, 7 miles from the Mazda, and officers say he couldn't have seen her from the road without walking into the scrub. An officer testifies Leo Sr. described the exact spot, and his claim of a grid-like search seems odd, since he was in a walking boot recovering from an injury. Some people wonder if he knew more than he let on, especially since he's now in prison for an unrelated sexual abuse conviction. He also admits to returning a carpet cleaner from Leo's trailer the day after Michelle vanished, which prosecutors say points to Leo hiding evidence. Leo insists it was for their puppy's messes, a claim Michelle's dad supports, noting there was no blood in the trailer when he checked while they were out searching for her. In 1988, Leo goes to trial. Prosecutors, led by John Aguero, paint him as a jealous, violent husband who killed Michelle in the trailer, cleaned up, and dumped her body, possibly with his father's help. The blood in the trunk, the trailer's presumptive tests, Alice's testimony, and Leo Sr.'s strange account form their case. But it's all circumstantial. There's no murder weapon, no DNA evidence tying Leo to the canal, and no clear crime scene. The defense argues Leo was searching for Michelle that night, supported by friends who saw him at band practice and later driving around with his family. They talk about the witnesses. Alice's story of seeing Leo that night is inconsistent, Linda's recount is unclear, and the LaFoons, another couple who claimed 18 months later to have seen Leo's car and his dad's truck near the canal, are unreliable. The blood evidence is weak. It's just a smear in the trunk, not a pool of blood, which would be more consistent with 26 stab wounds, and presumptive tests in the trailer aren't conclusive. Still, the jury, after a 2-hour deliberation, convicts Leo of first-degree murder in 1989. At 23, he's sentenced to life without parole, locked away in Hardy Correctional Institution. His dreams of a music career and a life with Michelle are gone. Leo maintains he's innocent, but very few people listen, since convicted murderers often claim they didn't do it. One person believes him, Chrissy Carter, a probation officer turned therapist who meets him in 1991. Convinced by his sincerity, she becomes his advocate, friend, and eventually his wife. She spends decades digging into the case, chasing leads police overlooked. In 2004, a breakthrough emerges. Fingerprints in Michelle's Mazda, missed in 1987, don't belong to Leo. The fingerprints are on a receipt in the trunk, the driver's door, and the surfaces on the car, front and back. They belong to Jeremy Scott, a 17-year-old in 1987 with a history of assaults and burglaries in Lakeland. Jeremy knew Bone Valley's backroads very well as a local, and he's a known stereo thief with a violent streak. Why was he in Michelle's car, touching multiple spots, if not tied to her death? The car radio was still intact, undermining the idea of a quick theft. Chrissy and Leo's legal team, backed by the Innocence Project of Florida, push for a new trial, arguing that Jeremy is the real killer. Prosecutors dismiss the prints, saying Jeremy likely broke into the car after Michelle's death to steal the radio. The courts agree, ruling that the fingerprints aren't enough to overturn the conviction. Hence, Leo stays in prison. In 2022, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Gilbert King takes up the case for his Bone Valley podcast, co-hosted with Kelsey Decker. Their investigation uncovers another bombshell. Jeremy Scott, who is now serving life for a 1997 murder in Polk County, actually confesses to killing Michelle. In recorded interviews, he says he saw her at Sparky's Exxon station, lured her to a remote spot, and stabbed her in a rage. He describes the canal off State Road 33 and slamming the Mazda into park, matching the damage on the gear shift, but his story still has some gaps. He claims he killed her in the car, yet no blood was found there, despite 26 stab wounds. Crime scene photos only show 2 small blood stains in the dirt near the canal, about the size of shoe prints, but there was no splatter or signs of a struggle. King and Decker suggest Jeremy lied about the location to hide a sexual assault motive, noting Michelle's torn skirt and missing shoes, which divers never found. Jeremy's fingerprints, his violent past, and his knowledge of the area make him a compelling suspect, but he's erratic, later denying the murder in a 2022 hearing, then admitting it again. He once flippantly claimed to kill everyone in Polk County that year and asked for money to talk. Then, the Prosecutors podcast, hosted by Brett Talley and Alice LaCour, dives into the case, noting the gearshift damage supports Jeremy's story, but a trial mechanic testified the car didn't stall as Jeremy described. The blood evidence is puzzling. A smear on the Downy bottle and a larger trunk stain don't match the volume of 26 stab wounds, and the trailer's presumptive tests could be false positives from bleach or rust. Crime scene techs didn't rule out the trailer but found no visible blood. The jury saw a diagram of the presumptive spots, which was never publicly released, and believed the trailer was the crime scene. Online, some people question Leo Sr.'s role in the whole thing. His canal story seems impossible, and his criminal record adds suspicion. Others argue the state's case relies on shaky witnesses like Alice, whose story shifted, and emotional appeals like Leo's 911 call were not hard evidence. Bone Valley's landscape plays a role in the mystery. The acidic canals and remote scrub help to hide evidence. Michelle's body was found by chance, and the swampy terrain likely erased clues. Her missing shoes and the small bloodstain suggest a quick attack, but where? The trailer, the car, or near the canal? The prosecution says Leo killed her at home and cleaned it up, pointing to the missing sheets and carpet cleaner. The defense says Jeremy's prints and confession point to him, and the lack of blood in the car or trailer supports a murder elsewhere. Both sides have holes. The state's case lacks a murder weapon or definitive crime scene, while Jeremy's confession doesn't fully align with the evidence. In April 2024, after 35 years in prison, Leo is paroled. At 58, he's free, reuniting with Chrissy and meeting his family, especially their adopted daughter, Ashley. But his conviction stands. He's not exonerated. The Polk County Sheriff's Office and prosecutors, known for high conviction rates, stick to their 1989 verdict, calling Jeremy's confession not credible due to his erratic testimony and history of lying. They argue the blood in the trunk and trailer, Leo's abuse history, and witness accounts prove his guilt. Leo's supporters, including the Innocence Project, demand more DNA testing on the bloodstains, the car, anything left. But unfortunately, the evidence is old, degraded. The state refuses, saying the case is closed. The case splits opinions. Prosecutors see Leo as a guilty man who got lucky on parole. They point to his admitted abuse, the blood evidence, and Alice's testimony, backed by her husband. The trailer's presumptive tests and Leo Sr.'s odd behavior, him returning the carpet cleaner and finding the body, which might suggest a cover-up. But the defense argues the case is flawed. Alice's story is inconsistent, the blood evidence is weak, and Jeremy's fingerprints and confession can't be ignored. Leo Sr.'s canal story still raises questions, but he was never charged. Some wonder if it's him, not Leo, who was actually involved, though no evidence confirms it. The swampy terrain of Bone Valley hid the truth, letting the killer slip away, whether it was Leo, Jeremy, or someone else. The mystery continues. Was Leo a violent husband who escaped justice, or an innocent man who lost 35 years of his life? Is Jeremy a liar exploiting a tragedy, or a murderer who got away? Why won't the state test more evidence? What secrets lie in Bone Valley's canals? Michelle deserved a life, not a brutal death at 18. Her family deserved answers, not decades of doubt. The Bone Valley podcast, Chrissy's advocacy, and public pressure brought Leo home, but the case isn't solved. If you're curious to dive deeper into the Michelle Schofield murder case and want to explore the detailed timeline of events, check out the Bone Valley podcast by Gilbert King and Kelsey Decker for an in-depth look at the investigation and Jeremy Scott's confession. You can also listen to the Prosecutors podcast by Brett Talley and Alice LaCour, which breaks down the evidence and timeline with a legal perspective. Both offer a wealth of information to help you piece together this complex mystery. Support groups like the Innocence Project of Florida, and share Michelle's story. The swamp may hide the truth, but we can keep asking questions. On September 25th, 1988, a man trudges through the muggy, tangled mess of Florida's green swamp, hunting for cypress wood to build patio furniture. This isn't a place you wander lightly. Spanning 870 square miles across Lake, Polk, Sumter, and Hernando counties, it's dense with sawgrass, cypress domes, and canals crawling with alligators. One wrong step, and you're lost. Or worse. Sticking close to County Road 474 near Claremont, eyes scanning for fallen logs, he stops cold. There, about 30 feet off the road, hidden in thick underbrush, is a body. It's mummified, baked by Florida's heat into something leathery, barely recognizable as human. The Lake County Sheriff's Office arrives, and it's clear. This is no accident. They suspect sexual assault and murder, but who is she? No missing person reports match. No witnesses step forward. For now, she's a Jane Doe, soon nicknamed Julie by investigators, a name inspired by the 1995 film To Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar. The killer chose this spot carefully. Dragging the body 30 feet off County Road 474 near the Lake Polk County line was calculated. Remote enough to avoid prying eyes, but close enough for a quick getaway. The green swamp is a beast where evidence vanishes fast. Gators can strip a body to bone in hours, acidic water dissolves DNA, and mud buries what's left. If you want to hide a crime, this is your spot. Investigators combed the scene. The victim, estimated to be 22 to 35 years old, had been dead for 2 to 4 weeks. Florida's heat and humidity had mummified her, preserving her clothes but destroying most forensic evidence. Her skirt and pantyhose were pulled down, suggesting sexual assault. There was no murder weapon, no fingerprints, and no witnesses. The autopsy, done by forensic anthropologist William Maples at the C.A. Pound Human Identification Lab in Gainesville, raised eyebrows. It noted healed fractures in her cheekbone, nose, and rib. She also had breast implants from before 1985. Maples concluded she was a woman who'd given birth, based on pitting in her pelvic bones. Small depressions that formed during pregnancy. This theory would mislead the case for decades. With no ID and no matching missing persons, Julie Doe went cold. Her remains sat in storage. Her file gathered dust. In 1988, the tools to solve her mystery simply didn't exist. Back then, solving a Jane Doe case was like finding a needle in a haystack. DNA profiling was still new. CODIS, the FBI's national DNA database, was just an idea. Most missing person files were scattered, local, and paper-based. Dental records were no use unless someone specific was missing. Her fingerprints? No match. Police canvassed Claremont, a small town outside Orlando. They checked reports across Florida. Nothing. It was as if she never existed. They tried. A forensic sketch based on her skull was released. Long blonde hair, manicured nails, a denim skirt, clues pointing to a young woman living an ordinary 1980s life. But no one came forward, no friends or family. The case faded into the background. What investigators didn't know was that Julie wasn't who they thought. Her identity, and the key to solving it, was tied to a community they barely understood: transgender women. Fast forward to 2015. Detective Tamara Dale, now leading the case, gets a call from the University of North Texas Center for Human Identification. They'd retested Julie's DNA as part of a statewide push to crack cold cases with new tech. The results flipped everything. Julie Doe had XY chromosomes. She was assigned male at birth. The pelvic pitting Maples thought came from childbirth, likely caused by hormone therapy. Julie was a transgender woman. This changed everything. In the 80s, trans people were barely visible to mainstream society. Gender-affirming care, like hormone therapy and surgery, was expensive and often underground, usually accessed in cities like Miami or Atlanta. Julie's pre-1985 breast implants suggested she had begun her transition long before her death. Her identity also explained why no missing person reports matched. Many trans women were estranged from family, living under chosen names, and often disappeared without anyone reporting them missing. Detective Dale was stunned. For 27 years, we thought she was a cisgender woman, she told the Orlando Sentinel. This opens new doors, but it's a whole new challenge. By 2019, the case was 31 years old and on life support. That's when Lake County turned to the DNA Doe Project, a nonprofit founded in 2017 to identify the unidentified through genetic genealogy. This wasn't your standard DNA test. This method cross-references a sample with public databases like GED Match and Family Tree DNA. By mapping family trees from distant cousins, genealogists can triangulate identities. But Julie's case was brutal. Her DNA had long degraded from decades in storage. 2 extraction attempts failed. Then, the Trans Doe Task Force stepped in. Founded by Leigh and Anthony Redgrave, who started as DNA Doe Project volunteers, This specialized team saw a gap in how trans victims were handled, often misgendered, their chosen names erased. Leigh is gender non-binary, Anthony is a trans man. Together, they understood what others missed. They pushed for Julie's case. A new forensic sketch by Carl Koppelman reflected her gender identity. A fundraiser for a new round of testing hit its goal in just 48 hours. By January 2020, Hudson Alpha Discovery successfully sequenced a sample. It was uploaded to GED Match. The search began. But it wasn't easy. Genealogists faced unknown parentage, adoption records, and tangled family trees. It was every genealogist's nightmare, team co-leader Eric Hendershot said. They didn't stop. They kept digging. March 10th, 2025. After 5 years and 2,000 volunteer hours, the DNA Doe Project makes the announcement. Julie Doe is Pamela Leigh Walton. Born May 13th, 1963, in Kentucky. She was 25 when she died. Pamela was adopted at age 5. She grew up in central Kentucky, Madison, Fayette, Garrard, and Mercer counties. In the mid-80s, a fight over an alleged theft estranged her from her adoptive family. Around the same time, she legally changed her name, likely when she began hormone therapy and had surgery. By her early 20s, Pamela was living in Florida, maybe near Orlando or Miami, where trans communities could live more freely. Her story raises questions. How did a woman from rural Kentucky afford transition surgeries in the 80s when insurance didn't cover them? Did she have a support network? A chosen family? The Advocate noted her story contains many familiar themes for trans people: alienation, discrimination, and resilience. A yearbook from her high school contained cruel handwritten slurs. A pre-carved headstone still bears her dead name. Pamela was living authentically in a world that wasn't ready for her, and when she disappeared, no one noticed. Even identifying Pamela hit roadblocks beyond science. In 2024, the DNA Doe Project launched a media campaign to find people who knew her, targeting Kentucky and Florida via Facebook. But the posts were flagged and removed by Meta's algorithms. The reason? Spam, they said. Or misleading. But privately, a support staffer admitted it was because they were promoting a transgender case in regions with high anti-trans sentiment. The posts were reinstated, only to be yanked again, a mirror of the same prejudice Pamela faced in life. But online, people cared. Reddit users on subreddits like Unresolved Mysteries and Grateful Doe kept her case alive. The LGBTQ+ community rallied too. Trans advocates, researchers, and digital sleuths banded together. Some are even crowdfunding access to possible 1988 mugshots from Kentucky, hoping they might offer a glimpse of Pamela in her final year. Yet the silence from her Florida life is deafening. Did illness claim her friends? Did fear of police keep them quiet? The search for her circle continues. Pamela's murder wasn't random. The body's location, 30 feet off a remote county road, wasn't accidental. Someone chose that spot for a reason. They knew the swamp would take care of it. The crime scene suggested sexual assault. Her skirt and pantyhose were pulled down. Detectives believe her killer was familiar with the area, maybe a hunter, a fisherman, someone local. Could she have been targeted for being trans? It's possible. In the 80s, violence against trans women was common and rarely prosecuted. Trans victims were easy targets. They often lived under the radar, and when they disappeared, few came looking. Pamela had old injuries, fractured ribs, a broken cheekbone, even a damaged nose. Signs of past violence. Was she escaping abuse? Was she hitchhiking or doing survival sex work to get by? We don't know, but her killer knew what they were doing. They disappeared into the swamp and left almost nothing behind. Pamela's case exposes deeper failures. In 1988, Lake County's investigators were working with limited tools, but also limited perspectives. The technology wasn't there. But neither was the cultural understanding. And Pamela wasn't alone. Even now, trans women face disproportionate violence. According to the Human Rights Campaign, they're 4 times more likely to be murdered, and far less likely to see their cases solved. Pamela's adoption added another layer. Her birth family didn't know her name. Her adoptive family had cut ties. Law enforcement didn't know where to look, and likely didn't think to look in the queer communities of Miami or Orlando. The system wasn't built to find someone like her. It still isn't. Her case joins a haunting list of unresolved disappearances, like Felipe Santos and Terrence Williams in Collier County. all victims from communities the system forgets. As of July 2025, Pamela's murder remains unsolved. The Lake County Sheriff's Office is still working the case. They're asking for leads, anyone who knew her in Florida, saw her in 1988, or remembers anything about the Green Swamp. But 37 years is a long time. Witnesses disappear, memories fade, and Pamela's killer? If they're still alive, they're likely in their 60s or older, living free while she rests in a shallow grave. The DNA Doe Project spent over 2,000 hours and coordinated more than 50 volunteers to restore her name. Hudson Alpha sequenced her DNA. Genealogist Lance Daly worked through adoption roadblocks. GED Match connected the dots. But no DNA was recovered from the crime scene. The swamp destroyed too much. Online, Reddit sleuths keep pushing, tracing her timeline, comparing clues, and mapping possibilities. Pamela Leigh Walton was 25, vibrant, brave, a woman who carved out a life on her own terms in a world that did everything to stop her. She deserved so much more, a safe home, a chosen family, and a future. Instead, she got a shallow grave in the Green Swamp. Her identification is a victory, but a bittersweet one. The DNA Doe Project, the Trans Doe Task Force, Detective Dale, they gave her back her name. But the person who took her life is still out there. The swamp kept her secret for 37 years, but it won't silence her forever. Finding her name was just the first step. Finding her killer is the next. And maybe, finally, Pamela will get the justice she's been waiting for. That's the story of 3 chilling cases tied to the murky, unforgiving swamps of the South, each one leaving more questions than answers. Pamela Leigh Walton, known for decades as Julie Doe, lay unidentified in Florida's Green Swamp until DNA revealed her name in 2024. Her killer, though, remains out there. Michelle Schofield's brutal stabbing in Bone Valley's canals led to Leo Schofield's conviction, but Jeremy Scott's fingerprints and confession cast doubt on whether justice was truly served. And finally, in Louisiana's Jefferson Davis Parish, the Jeff Davis 8, 8 women found dead in swamps and canals between 2005 and 2009 point to a web of drugs, corruption, and mishandled investigations with no arrests despite whispers of police involvement. These swamps, from Florida to Louisiana, seem to swallow the truth, protecting the guilty and silencing the victims. If you want to dig deeper into Michelle's case and unravel its complex timeline, check out the Bone Valley podcast by Gilbert King and Kelsey Decker, or the Prosecutors podcast by Brett Talley and Alice LaCour, both available on major platforms. If you have any clues or tips on any of these cases, please reach out to the respective contact on screen. Support efforts like the DNA Doe Project or the Innocence Project of Florida. Keep these stories alive. Share them and talk about them. The swamps may hide the answers, but we can keep searching. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.